The studio lights buzzed above the polished black floor of the network's flagship debate hall. It was the kind of night producers prayed for: two heavyweights, one stage, and a nation on edge. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat quietly at her podium, fingers folded, her expression unreadable. On the opposite end, Ron DeSantis adjusted his cufflink with that practiced coolness he wore like armor. He didn't look over at her once. The moderator's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Tonight, we bring together two of the most polarizing figures in American politics for a conversation on democracy, leadership, and the future of our nation. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Governor Ron DeSantis, AOC, tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing. DeSantis offered only a short nod. What began with rehearsed civility quickly turned into ideological warfare. Immigration, climate policy, education, each topic peeled away another layer of restraint. And then it happened. When the subject shifted to the Florida governor's record on election laws and voter suppression, AOC leaned forward. "You built your career on silencing voices," she said, "not amplifying democracy. You're not a patriot, Governor. You're a fraud." The audience gasped audibly. The moderator's eyes went wide. DeSantis smirked, the same smug expression that made headlines during his presidential bid. "Coming from someone who champions socialism with hashtags, that's rich," he fired back. But AOC didn't blink. She stood up. "You're nothing but a fraud," she snapped, pointing across the table. "Every time you speak of freedom, you mean control. Every time you say liberty, you mean censorship. And I won't sit here and let you manipulate millions any longer." The room fell into a tense silence. No one moved. Even the control room, bustling seconds ago, froze on her image, knowing this clip would be viral in minutes. DeSantis finally looked up, eyes narrowed, not with shock, but with calculation. He realized this wasn't just another debate. This was war. AOC's words still lingered in the air like static electricity. "You're nothing but a fraud!" And the crowd was dead silent for a second too long. The silence wasn't awkward. It was nuclear. Cameras zoomed in instinctively, producers whisper-screamed into headsets, and Twitter notifications had already started buzzing in journalists' pockets backstage. Ron DeSantis straightened his spine, a tight smile forming on his face. He was used to pressure. But this was different. He had expected a calculated policy debate, not a political ambush in front of a national audience. "Oh, I see what this is," he said, voice low and slow. "This is your moment, right? A viral takedown for your TikTok following. Bravo, AOC didn't budge. This isn't a performance. This is an intervention for the American people. Because we're done being gaslit by men like you who rewrite facts and weaponize fear." The moderator tried to interject, raising a hand like a helpless traffic cop in the middle of a political car crash. "Congresswoman, Governor, let's stick to policy." But it was already too late. DeSantis leaned forward. "I've actually governed, Congresswoman. While you've built a career out of Instagram stories and clever tweets, I've passed legislation, managed crises, and protected freedoms." "Freedoms?" AOC cut in sharply. "You banned books, Ron. You silenced teachers. You threatened corporations that didn't bow to your worldview. Your idea of freedom is just control in camouflage." The audience murmured again, louder this time. One woman in the back clapped. Another whispered, "Oh my God," to her friend. DeSantis shot back. "And your idea of leadership is letting government run every part of our lives, from what we drive to what we eat." AOC's eyes lit with fire. "No, Governor, My idea of leadership is making sure no child goes to bed hungry, no family is bankrupted by insulin, and no billionaire, especially one who funds you, gets away with gutting our democracy." Gasps erupted again. The debate was no longer about policy. It was personal, primal. Two American archetypes colliding on live television. Populist aggression versus progressive defiance. Even the moderator had given up trying to steer the chaos. And across America, millions watched with frozen attention, leaning closer to their screens, not to hear solutions, but to see who would strike next. By now, the studio wasn't just warm, it was boiling. The lighting rigs above them felt like spotlights from a courtroom, and every camera angle was catching the beads of sweat, the clenched jaws, the hand gestures that bordered on combative. But AOC wasn't here to retreat. "You talk about legislation like it's holy," she snapped, voice unwavering. "But every bill you sign is a blow to someone who doesn't look like you, vote like you, or pray like you. You don't govern. You punish." DeSantis leaned back, composed on the surface, but his eyes narrowed. "I protect the majority from elite moral bullies like you. The country's tired of being lectured by politicians who never built anything, never sacrificed anything." "I built trust," AOC fired back, her finger now pointed directly at him. "I built movements. I built hope in places your donors wouldn't dare step foot in without a security detail." The studio audience gasped. This wasn't just political theater. It was a verbal cage match. And AOC had no interest in playing by anyone's rules tonight. DeSantis scoffed. "You built a brand, not a movement. Your followers don't vote, they repost. They don't lead, they cancel." That hit like a jab, but AOC didn't flinch. Maybe they cancel lies, corruption, and cowardice, and if that offends you, maybe it's because you see your reflection in it. Boom, the moderator tried again. "Let's get back to the topic, climate policy." But no one was listening. The audience was on the edge of their seats, phones raised, capturing every second for the algorithm. And then AOC pulled a document from under her podium. "You want to talk about leadership? Here's your donor list. Oil executives, pharma giants, private prison tycoons. You serve them, not the people. You don't lead, you cash in." Even DeSantis's mask of composure cracked slightly. "This is libel," he said coldly. "This," she said, holding the paper higher, "is receipts." And America's watching. From coast to coast, Twitter threads were erupting, YouTube live streams spiked, and every news outlet had cut their commercial breaks to stay live. No one wanted to miss the next strike, because in this showdown, there were no rules, only two visions for America, clashing in real time. For a few seconds, silence swallowed the studio like a vacuum. Even the moderator blinked, lost for words. AOC kept her hand raised with the document, unwavering, her stance more prosecutor than politician now. "You can't hide behind slogans forever, Governor. You may sell the freedom brand, but let's be honest, your version of freedom is only for the privileged." DeSantis's jaw tightened. "I protect Americans from leftist authoritarianism, from people like you, who'd rather teach guilt than grit." "You mean guilt for the crimes your policies cause?" She cut in sharply. "For the bans, the books, the bigotry?" The crowd murmured louder now. Tension wasn't just thick, it was pulsing. You could hear someone whispering, "Did she just say that?" DeSantis leaned forward, elbows on the table. His voice lowered to a near growl. "What you do isn't justice. It's revenge dressed up as progress. You divide this country every time you open your mouth." AOC didn't blink. "And you poison it every time you sign a bill." The moderator tried once more. "We're moving into closing statements in just a moment." But suddenly a voice interrupted from the audience. "Let her speak," someone yelled. "Show us the rest of the list," another screamed. AOC dropped the stack of documents onto the desk with a loud smack, the papers sliding across toward DeSantis. "You want the rest? Be my guest. It's all there. Your voting record, your donations, your connections." DeSantis picked up one page, scanned it, and then slowly placed it down. "You're not a public servant," AOC declared. "You're a product, and America is waking up." The crowd exploded. Some stood and clapped, others booed. The moderator shouted over the noise, "We're going to a break." But it was too late. Clips were already being tweeted with captions like, "AOC exposes DeSantis live," "DeSantis freezes on air," "Receipts hit harder than rhetoric," and the two adversaries? Still locked in an unbroken stare. As the echoes of the crowd died down, the camera zoomed in. DeSantis sat stiffly, face unreadable, the documents still scattered before him. AOC remained poised, her chest rising and falling with deliberate calm, but her eyes never left him. "You think this is some kind of performance?" he muttered finally, a sharpness in his voice that pierced the silence. "You've made a career out of ambush politics, turning every hearing, every debate into a stage show." "And yet you still showed up," she replied coolly. "Because deep down, you knew this wasn't about me. It's about the truth you've been running from." DeSantis gave a small laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You want to talk about truth? Tell the American people what your Green New Deal actually costs. Tell them about the job losses, the shutdowns, the inflation. You're selling hope dressed in fantasy." AOC leaned forward, voice low and slicing. "Better that than selling fear dressed in patriotism." The crowd gasped again. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a dismantling. The moderator's mic buzzed to life. "We need to—" "No," AOC said firmly, turning slightly toward the cameras. "People need to hear this." Then she looked straight at the lens. "This country isn't a playground for political egos. It's bleeding. And every time we let frauds like him disguise cruelty as leadership, we lose more of what we stand for." DeSantis stood abruptly. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. But he didn't leave. Instead, he placed both hands on the table and said in a tight, controlled voice, "You've just drawn a line, Congresswoman." She didn't flinch. "No, Governor. I drew it a long time ago. Tonight I just dared you to cross it." The screen split, half on her, half on him. Two visions, two Americas. Social media platforms lit up like wildfire. Number AOC versus DeSantis. Number fraud or freedom. Number line drawn. And somewhere deep in the newsroom control booth, a producer whispered, "We've just gone viral." The room held its breath. The silence was no longer awkward. It was electric. Even the moderator had abandoned his script. Cameras stayed fixed, production crew froze, and America leaned closer to its screens. DeSantis finally broke the stare. He reached for a glass of water, took a slow sip, and placed it down with precision. Then, in a voice colder than ever before, he said, "You accuse me of fraud, but you represent a movement built on delusion. Free money, free health care, free housing, all paid for with, what? Tweets?" AOC let the words hang in the air before responding, her tone razor-sharp. "You know what's more delusional, Governor? Thinking corporate tax breaks will feed hungry children. Thinking deregulating water will give us something clean to drink. You peddle survival of the richest and call it patriotism." Gasps again, not just from the audience, but even from the control room. One producer whispered, "This isn't just a debate anymore. It's a reckoning. DeSantis's jaw tightened. You've made enemies, Congresswoman. I didn't come here to make friends, AOC shot back. I came here to show the country that bold doesn't mean reckless. It means honest. You may wear the suit, but I carry the receipts. At that moment, a screen behind them flickered with fact checks and live tweets. AOC's quotes climbing the trending charts. DeSantis memes already forming. Suddenly, a voice from the audience shouted, "Let her speak!" And another, "Let him answer!" The room turned tribal. No longer a crowd, now a nation divided. The moderator leaned into his mic. "We will continue, but we ask for order, please." But AOC didn't wait. "Here's the truth, Governor," she said, voice low and unwavering. "You don't fear me. You fear what I represent. A future where men like you don't write the rules unchecked." And DeSantis, this time, had no words, just a stare. And the roar of an awakened studio. The camera zoomed in on AOC, her face calm but blazing with conviction. DeSantis, seated rigidly, kept glancing at the teleprompter, but no line could save him now. The debate had officially spun out of moderation. It had become a duel. "You know why this matters?" AOC said, locking eyes not with DeSantis, but the audience, and every screen watching across the country. "Because this moment isn't about me. It's about the people watching, the teachers underpaid, the mothers choosing between insulin and rent, the kids who believe politics is just theater." DeSantis finally stirred. "Then stop making it theater," he retorted, voice firm. "Because that's what you're best at, isn't it? Viral moments, headlines, drama." AOC tilted her head, smiled without humor. "You know what's funny, Governor? Drama is what happens when people finally speak truths that make the powerful sweat." The studio rumbled with applause. Some clapped, others booed, but no one looked away. At that moment, the moderator turned to DeSantis. "Governor, would you like to respond to the Congresswoman's points?" He leaned forward. "I will. But not with slogans," he said sharply. "Let's talk about results. Florida has the lowest tax burden in the nation. We lead in economic freedom." AOC didn't flinch. "And the highest teacher vacancies, one of the worst environmental safety records, and skyrocketing insurance costs. Freedom for who?" The audience gasped again. Then someone in the back shouted, "Fact check that!" Screens above the stage lit up. Real-time data sourced from independent watchdogs. AOC's claims checked out. DeSantis's rebuttals, partially true at best. He stiffened. "You're twisting context. I'm quoting statistics, Governor." The tension was now unbearable. People in the live audience were leaning forward in their chairs, hands over mouths. DeSantis, now visibly irritated, muttered under his breath. The mic caught it, and it played back. "She's dangerous." A split second later, the studio erupted, not with applause or laughter, but a stunned silence. AOC turned to him slowly, her voice slicing through the air. "Dangerous? For telling the truth?" She stood up from her chair, walked to the edge of the platform, and said, "Then every American who wants justice is dangerous too. You just insulted them all." AOC's words still hung in the air like an approaching storm. The phrase, "You just insulted them all," echoed in the stunned silence. And then, as if on cue, the crowd responded. Not in a single voice, but a wave. Some erupted in applause, others jeered, and a few even stood up, shouting back at the stage. Moderator Davis tried to intervene. "Please, let's keep order in the studio." Too late. A voice from the left wing of the audience shouted, "She's right. We are being ignored." Another yelled, "Why won't anyone ever say this on TV?" AOC remained steady, eyes scanning the crowd, neither feeding the chaos nor backing away from it. DeSantis raised his hand and gestured toward the shouting audience. "See? This is what you do, Congresswoman. You rile people up with emotion, not facts. You burn down the institution to build your own brand." That's when AOC stepped forward again. "No, Governor. I challenge a system that stopped listening," she shot back. "You call it emotion. I call it a last resort." The cameras caught every second. The studio lights reflected off the teleprompters now completely abandoned. The debate had become a battlefield of truths and perception. Then the moderator asked a question no one expected. "If you could say one sentence to the other, uncensored, what would it be?" DeSantis sneered. "I'd say, stop pretending you care. You're not a revolutionary. You're a performer." The crowd murmured loudly, some in agreement, others in outrage. AOC didn't blink. "I'd say this. The future isn't yours to control, and no amount of polished tyranny will make you its hero." Gasps. The moderator tried to cut to commercial, but the control room held off. Ratings were through the roof. In the control booth, the producer whispered, "This is going viral. Leave it running." DeSantis clenched his jaw. "You're calling me a tyrant?" "I'm calling you afraid," AOC replied. "Afraid of what happens when people realize they deserve more than what you're offering." And for a moment, just a breath, he had no answer. Just as DeSantis opened his mouth to retort, the screen behind them flickered. The moderator, now visibly sweating, looked toward the producer's booth with confusion. Then a voice echoed through the studio speakers. "We have a surprise live call-in. A former staffer from the governor's administration has requested to weigh in." DeSantis visibly stiffened. "What the hell is this?" he muttered under his breath, his mic still on. A second later, a new window appeared on the broadcast screen, a woman in her 30s, sharp-eyed, calm, and clearly ready to speak. Her nameplate read, Clara Winslow, former DeSantis education advisor. "Governor," she began, her voice steady, "you know me. I worked under your office for 2 years. I saw the decisions behind closed doors. I saw the fear you had every time AOC's speeches gained traction online." The crowd collectively gasped. DeSantis leaned forward, face flushed. "Clara, this is not the place." "No," she interrupted. "This is exactly the place. You once said, and I quote, 'If the people ever start believing her, we're done.' Remember that?" AOC turned slowly toward DeSantis, eyebrows raised. The governor's expression turned stony. "This is a hit job, a desperate stunt." But Clara continued, unfazed. "You weaponized education policy to silence minority voices. You used state funds to run smear campaigns. And now you're here pretending to be a man of the people?" The studio was silent except for the low hum of electronics and the faint rustling of shocked movement from the audience. AOC stepped forward. "Governor, I don't need to call you a fraud. You've just been fact-checked on live television by your own former staff." DeSantis stood up. "I won't sit here and be ambushed." "Then walk out," AOC snapped. "But know that every step away from this stage is another nail in your political coffin." Gasps. The camera zoomed in on DeSantis. He hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the producer booth, toward the exit, toward the roaring digital world outside this room already exploding with the footage. And then he sat back down, not in defeat, but in calculated, rigid survival. The studio was electric. Tense silence stretching like a taut wire across the room. Ron DeSantis, his knuckles white as he gripped the table, glared at the camera as if daring it to blink. AOC, standing tall, arms folded, had the air of someone who had not just won a debate, but revealed something larger, a fracture in a system. "Let me make something crystal clear," she said, turning toward the audience, then squarely facing the camera. "This isn't about me. It's not even about him. It's about the people watching this, the ones who've been told they're too loud, too brown, too poor, too radical to deserve a voice." The audience applauded, slowly at first, then faster, rising. DeSantis looked as if he wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't form. AOC continued, "You call us dangerous because we challenge your comfort. You call us woke because you're afraid of people waking up. But tonight," she paused, leaning into the mic, "America just watched you blink." She tapped her fingers twice on the desk, not out of nervousness, but punctuation. The moment carried weight. DeSantis finally stood. "You twist narratives. You weaponize emotion. You want chaos." "No," AOC said sharply. "We want change. And you? You're just scared of it." The moderator, lost in the spectacle, fumbled his note cards. "Well, that wraps tonight's debate." But it didn't. The final note came when Clara Winslow's voice returned. Not visually, but through the studio speakers once more. "To those still wondering which side of history you're on, tonight probably made it very clear." The screen faded to black. Within minutes, clips from the debate were trending on every major platform. AOC vs. DeSantis, Chairman fraud exposed. Chairman mic drop AOC. Twitter melted. TikTok reenactments began. Political analysts canceled their scripts and rewrote entire show plans. And somewhere in a quiet room, Ron DeSantis stared at a screen in silence, realizing that the moment he tried to frame as a win had just redefined the battlefield. Tonight wasn't just a debate. It was a collision of ideology, of vision, of truth versus illusion. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't just challenge Ron DeSantis, she dismantled the facade, word by word, fact by fact. Whether you stand with progress or resist it, one thing is clear: the conversation has changed, and it's not going back. Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning.